Last year, I signed up for what was advertised as a psychological experiment. I found the ad in my local paper. It mentioned they were looking for imaginative people, and the pay was good. It was the only job that week I felt qualified for, so I called them, had an interview, and got the gig. The task seemed simple enough. Stay in a room, alone, with sensors on my head to monitor my brain activity and visualize a double of myself. They called it a tulpa. They explained that if I got bored or restless, I should imagine my double moving around instead of me. I'd even interact with him. I agreed, especially once they mentioned the pay. The next day, I started. The room was basic: a bed, a table with a little black box connected to the sensors on my head. For the first few days, I struggled to keep my double in mind. I'd visualize him for a bit, then get distracted. But by the fourth day, I managed to keep him around for the full 6 hours. The researchers said I was doing well. The second week, they moved me to a new room with speakers mounted on the walls. They wanted to see if I could maintain my tulpa with distractions, ugly, discordant music that made it more challenging, but not impossible. The following week, the sounds escalated to something more unsettling: shrill noises, feedback loops, guttural voices. I was unfazed. By then, I was a pro. After about a month, I started interacting with my tulpa to break the monotony. We'd talk, play rock, paper, scissors, or I'd imagine him juggling or dancing. When I asked the researchers if this was okay, they encouraged me. Things took a turn when, during a conversation about my first date, my tulpa corrected me on a detail. I'd remembered a yellow top, but he insisted it was green. After a moment, I realized he was right. It unnerved me, but the researchers said it was just me tapping into my subconscious. I started to see it as a way to access forgotten memories, and soon I could make my tulpa recite entire pages from books I'd read years ago. Eventually, I began visualizing my double outside of the research center. It felt natural to see him around, like an invisible friend. I'd take him along with me when hanging out with friends, visiting my mom, even on dates. He was more than a repository of my memories. He seemed to understand people better than I did. He'd notice things I missed, like how someone was laughing too hard at my jokes or leaning toward me. With his advice, my dates went better. By the 4th month, my tulpa was always with me. One day the researchers asked if I'd stopped visualizing him. I hadn't, and they seemed pleased. When I asked my double if he knew why they'd asked, he just shrugged it off. I began to withdraw from the world. People seemed so unsure of themselves while I could consult my double about anything. It made social interactions feel trivial. A friend of mine noticed and confronted me. He pounded on my door, angry I'd been avoiding him. As I was about to apologize, my tulpa grew furious. "Hit him," he said, and before I knew it, I had. We fought brutally, and I ended up hurting him badly. When the police came, I convinced them he'd started it. My tulpa was grinning the whole time. Later I realized it was my double, not me, who'd felt the anger. "You don't need him. You don't need anyone," he whispered, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I told the researchers, but they just laughed it off. "You can't be scared of something you're imagining," one said. My tulpa smirked beside him, but over the next few days, I couldn't shake the growing fear. My tulpa was changing, taller, more menacing, with a twisted smile and eyes filled with malice. I decided I needed to stop visualizing him, but it wasn't easy. The more I tried, the more monstrous he became. Then, after 5.5 months, 2 men restrained me, and someone injected me with something. I woke up strapped to the bed, music blaring, my tulpa standing over me. He looked barely human, his eyes sunken, his nails like claws. He mocked me relentlessly. "They're pumping you full of the good stuff," he whispered. I tried to focus, to get rid of him, but I couldn't. For weeks, they kept me drugged and disoriented. My tulpa stayed by my side, taunting me, sometimes even hurting me. At times, I wondered if I was the thought form, not him. Then one day, he touched my head, looked puzzled, and said, "All thoughts are creative," and he left the room. I was released soon after. I stumbled out of the building and collapsed in the parking lot. When I finally made it home, I locked the door, pushed a dresser against it, and didn't leave for days. The police found nothing at the research center. It was empty, and all the paperwork was fake. I thought it was over. I rarely left the house, had panic attacks, but I was alive. Then, 3 days ago, my mother called. My sister had been murdered, gutted like the other victims in a spree. The funeral was today, but I couldn't focus. All I could hear was that music, the discordant, unsettling sound that had filled my mind for months. It's getting louder now. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more.